Hi, welcome to Book Squad. If you haven't seen one of these videos before, I started this last month. I decided that I was fed up of badgering my lovely relatives and the rest of the Jack and the Geekstalk team to read books, so I thought instead I'd just come share them with you guys on YouTube. So how this works is that each month I pick a book that I'm going to be reading for the following month, and then at the end of that month I come and film another video where I tell you what I thought about the book. Hopefully get to include some of your thoughts as well, and then pick my book for the next month. So last time I chose the book that I'd be reading in August, and the book that I chose was All That She Can See by Carrie Hope Fletcher. The reason I chose this was because it had come out around the time that I was filming the Book Squad video, and I'd read Carrie's first novel, On the Other Side, and really enjoyed it, so I was hoping that I would enjoy this one just as much. And I know from Jack and the Geekstalk Twitter followers that some of you did go out and buy this book and read it as well, which is pretty cool. One of the things I said when I chose this book last month was that the first book, it's not a sequel, it's not a series, they're completely different stories, but in Carrie Hope Fletcher's first book, On the Other Side, I read it really quickly. I read it in about 3 days. I really couldn't put it down. I bought into it really quickly. I loved the kind of magical realism, and that it wasn't much like the book that I thought it was going to be. It was a really passionate story, and I really enjoyed it, and I really engaged with that book, and I was hoping that this book would be the same, or have the same kind of effect. I did read this book just as quickly, in fact possibly even slightly quicker, mainly because I had a day off that happened to fall around the time that I was reading it, so I think I read this in about 2.5 days or something. I found very quickly I was buying into the story, but not in the same way that I did, and if I'm honest, I think this book for me personally suffered purely because I loved On the Other Side so much, and I couldn't help but compare them. So On the Other Side kind of starts by telling you the ending of the story, and then you go back and see how the story plays out, and I just found myself completely enthralled and entranced, and I think it really helped that I really bought into both of the characters in On the Other Side. In All That She Can See, the magical realism element again was just brilliant, and Carrie Hope Fletcher writes that really well, that kind of there being magic every day that we just don't notice or know about, and it's really clever the way that she's able to interject that into just normal society, you know, our normal world. I really enjoyed that, and I liked how she set that up again in this. I really liked Cherry as a character. And again, the kind of story she gave her was great as well. I did feel that she built up, so what I should say, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about the synopsis because you could just read the book, and some of you will have read the book, and because you could find a review with the entire synopsis in it, and I don't want too many spoilers, but in short, Cherry has a gift where she can see people's feelings, but she can only see their bad feelings that they have. For example, loneliness, grief, hatred, anger, those sorts of feelings. And it talks about the fact that she was adopted and she had 2 dads, but that one of her dads didn't really know how to handle, because as a child she didn't know that not everybody saw these things that she saw. So one of her dads didn't know how to handle having a child who, you know, appeared to have a really vivid imagination or could see things that nobody else could. And so he leaves. And it's kind of referenced a couple of times throughout the book, but there's no real payoff for that. There's no... I kept expecting him to pop back up in the story at some point, and he never did. So he kind of felt like a slightly pointless character, although I get that the idea of being abandoned by one of your dads clearly adds to the sense of loneliness which accompanies Cherry throughout the story, and in fact becomes quite pivotal. But that kind of setup and not paying off kind of happens a few times in the book. So one of the things that I did find is this book didn't really feel like it ended, or that it had an ending. Obviously the book comes to an end when there are no more words, but it didn't necessarily feel that it was a story that had finished. I don't think it's been intentionally left open for a sequel to be written, but I don't know, I could be wrong. But just so much crammed into the last kind of couple of chapters that didn't really feel resolved. And one of the things is, so Cherry meets somebody else who has the same gift as her. She meets someone as a child called Peter, but he is taken away as a child. He then turns back up at the end of the book, which I wouldn't say it feels shoehorned, him turning back up, but it does feel a little bit forced to me, or at least at best incredibly coincidental that out of anywhere in the whole of the UK he could have gone, he ends up right where Cherry happens to be. But one of the things that kind of bugged me and stood out as a loose thread, I guess, the other kind of main character is a guy called Chase, and he has the same gift, but he can only see positive emotions that people have, and he's quite negatively affected by that. But his mum is actually basically a fraudulent psychic. She pretends that she has visions and that she is psychic, and kind of defrauds people a little bit. And one of the major plot points towards the end is her getting her comeuppance for doing that. So there's this whole thing about, you know, Chase's family had always wanted him to have, or to, you know, show the inclination to have a psychic ability, you know, basically act like they do, and he never wants to do that when it turns out he has an actual gift and they don't. But then later on towards the end of the book, there's a comment made about, oh, we found that the gift is passed down the mother's line. So it kind of leaves a bit of a thread that needs to be pulled on about Chase's mother. So does she actually have an ability, or doesn't she? And not being able to tell. And Chase doesn't appear to hear that information and go, oh, does that mean my mum does have an ability like mine? So that was just something that just felt a little bit left open. And a lot of the end of the book, it felt quite left open to me. It didn't feel like an entirely complete story. I think part of it is that it feels like two different books. So the first half of this book, you know, was kind of whimsical. You had the magical realism, and I really thought this story was going to be kind of Chase versus Cherry storyline. I thought he was kind of going to be her nemesis throughout. And then the second half of the book actually becomes kind of more, a little bit dystopian, but more kind of action fantasy orientated, which I wasn't expecting, and probably, I don't know, it ramped up slightly too quickly for me. There wasn't enough of a build-up for that change in pace for me personally. What I would say is it is still a really interesting story. I don't want anyone to think it was a bad book, and I don't like that I'm not sort of glowing, it's not a positively glowing kind of review. It is a really good book. It just, that last little bit felt a little bit too rushed to me. And I think perhaps if the second half of the book had been drawn out a little bit more, not because it needed to be longer, but just some elements were explained more, or in fact some elements were taken away so that you had more detail around fewer parts of the story, I think I would have liked that more. I think I just feel like I'm a little bit lacking. It doesn't feel complete, and I don't like things not being complete. It doesn't feel like an entirely ended story. Also, I have a little bit of a bugbear about books that end with letters to another character to try and tie up all loose ends. I don't like that very much across any books, and that is how this book kind of ends. But there are some really interesting points in here, and the story as a whole is a genius idea. And actually, if she did write a sequel to this book, I would probably still go and buy it and read it, because I would love to see how the story kind of continues. I think probably now that I know what direction the story is probably going to go in, I would really, really enjoy that. I really liked the characters. I thought Cherry was really well written. I really enjoyed her character. I really liked some of the supporting characters that were in there. I liked Chase's character. I liked how he was written, but he seemed to change literally like that. And he went from being someone who was kind of out for himself and using his ability in quite a negative way and being very deliberately provocative and combative towards Cherry, to suddenly being in love with her. It just felt slightly too rushed. Again, there wasn't enough build-up around their romance. I think maybe this is 2 books and it needed to be written as 2 books, because I like the first half and I like the second half. I just don't like them together, and it didn't feel like there was enough bridging between the 2 bits for me. But then, to be fair, I tend to like books that are the size of War and Peace, so maybe that has an impact. But I don't want to completely trash a book. I'm always so conscious of how much effort goes into writing a book, and it isn't a terrible book. It's not terribly written. There are just bits of it that I actually would like more of, so that I really, really loved this book. And I do think it really suffers for the fact that I really, really loved Carrie Hope Fletcher's first novel, and this is just a different story. It's not a bad story. As like I say, it's a great idea. It's a great premise, and the writing is really good, and the majority of the story is executed really, really well. I just needed a little bit more in some parts, I think. Anyway, that's enough about what I thought. What did you think? So, like I said, I know that a few people were hoping to read this in August. I also know that not everybody has the time to read an entire book in that kind of time frame. Not everybody sort of throws themselves into a book in the manner that I tend to. So I know there are a few people that are still reading this book. A lot of people that have contacted have sort of said that they're really liking the early part of the book that they're in, so I'll be really interested to see whether they continue to enjoy the book and what they feel when they get to the end of the story. But one person that I know who did read the book and who actually wrote a review about it is Ken Major, who is at KenMajor83 on Twitter. And I did have a read. He did a review on Goodreads, I think it is, that he did his review on, but I went and had a good read of his Goodreads review, and the things that he said, and I did write them down so that I could remember, the things that Ken said was that it wasn't a book that he would have ordinarily chosen, and I really like that. I really like that I chose a book and Ken decided that he would go out and read it with me, alongside me, because I had suggested it. So I really like that. Thanks so much, Ken. Ken said that he really, really enjoyed it. He said it was a really interesting setup, which I entirely agree with. One of the points that he picked up actually was that Carrie Hope Fletcher is a YouTuber. She's also a stage actress, but she is a YouTuber. She has an enormous YouTube following. So it was really interesting that one of the characteristics that Cherry has is that she has absolutely no idea how to use the internet, and actually there is a little bit of time in the book around her kind of trying to get to grips with social media and using Facebook. Ken pointed out that the second half is very dystopian, and how that moved the story on, and he's right. As soon as you get to the part to the sort of kind of the second half of the book where it does become more dystopian, the story really does move at a pace. And Ken gave the book 4 stars overall, which that's 4 out of 5, so that's pretty good going. I think for me it was probably a 3 out of 5. Although if I hadn't read On the Other Side, maybe it might have been a 4 out of 5. That is what I made of All That She Can See. That was what Ken thought of All That She Can See, and I hope that some of you have really enjoyed it as well. So now it is time to move on and choose the next book that I'm going to be reading for September. So I had quite a few suggestions come in via Twitter, and I'm really grateful to everybody that did submit some suggestions. Most of those suggestions are definitely going to make it on my to read list at some point, but obviously I can't choose all of them to be my September Book Squad pick. The one that I have chosen really stuck out, partly because the name seems really satisfying to pronounce or to say, and when I went and just did a quick Google of the suggestions, this one really seemed up my street, although probably slightly different from anything I've read before. So the suggestion came from the Smorgasbord podcast, who are at SmorgasbordPod on Twitter. Go give them a follow. And they suggested The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch. Now at this point, ideally, I would hold up the book to show you, but I don't have a copy of it yet. I am just about to go and order my copy of it so that it arrives with me in time for September so that I can read it in September. But that is what I have chosen. So if you have read that book, please be sure to let me know what you think of it. Or if you are going to read along with me in September, also please let me know and tell me what you make of it. And then I will include your views and your reviews of that book into the next Book Squad. And also carry on giving me suggestions. So the next Book Squad will be at the end of September, choosing a book for October. I've already had one suggestion come in for a Halloween kind of themed one for October, but do let me have other suggestions as well, because I will have a good look at those and decide. But that is my pick. That is what I will be reading. I will be reading The Lies of Loch Lamora. So I'm really looking forward to that. I hope you guys might join me in that as well. So be sure to come and find us on Twitter, where we are at Jack Geekstalk, and come and let us know if you do read All That She Can See, what you made of it. If you are going to read along with The Lies of Loch Lamora, please let me know. It's really nice to know that people are reading along too, and let me know what you make of the book, or if you've read it in the past, tell me what you think of it so I can include that next time, and keep giving me suggestions for future Book Squad books. Otherwise, you can also go and find our blog, which is jackandthegeekstalk.wordpress.com, and I will see you next month for Book Squad. Bye!